You are a fool. Just like that, with those 3 words, what should have been a simple land dispute in Abuja absolutely blew up into a national spectacle. You see, this wasn't just some argument. This was a public, raw clash between 2 of Nigeria's most powerful institutions, playing out for everyone to see. Welcome to Africa Watch 360, calm, clear, and focused news you can trust. We look deeper so you understand better.
So today, we're breaking down that viral confrontation involving the Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, Sanwo-Olu. The fallout has been fast and furious, with a former army chief now demanding a formal public apology. But you know, this whole thing is so much more than just a viral video clip. It feels like a symptom of a much deeper, more strategic issue. Something about this is just more calculated than it looks on the surface. Let's peel back the layers together. All right, here's our game plan. We'll start with exactly how this whole thing went viral. Then, we're going to dissect the criticisms against both the minister and the military's involvement. From there, we'll get into why this was framed as a genuine national security threat, and what that tells us about a much bigger systemic failure. And finally, we'll connect all the dots. Let's get into it. Okay, let's set the scene. We are in Abuja. The heart of the matter is a disputed plot of land at a development site. On one side of this, you've got the FCT Minister, Wike, who represents the civil government. He's a powerful guy, often seen as a political enforcer. And on the other side, a military officer, who was reportedly there guarding the property for a former chief of naval staff. This was never going to be just a simple disagreement. It was a high-stakes public showdown. And boy, did things escalate quickly. First, you had the FCT officials show up trying to enforce a stop-work order. Then, they were apparently removed by soldiers, which is a pretty clear show of force. So how does Minister Wike respond? He shows up himself in person, not to calm things down, but to confront them head-on. And that's exactly when the phones came out, the camera started rolling, and this raw, unfiltered exchange lit a match that started a firestorm online. So this brings us to the minister's actions, which, to put it mildly, have drawn a lot of sharp criticism. Analysts are arguing that his decision to even be there and the way he conducted himself was a massive error in judgment. It really seemed to reveal a style of governing that's all about confrontation, not about following protocol.
And the critiques are very specific. Commentators have flat out called his decision to show up in person a total big mistake. The thinking is, as a minister, he really has no business confronting a junior military officer on the street. The proper, professional way to handle this? Pick up the phone, call the chief of defense staff, or even the president. That is how the business of the state is supposed to work. But instead, it just spiraled into personal insults, calling the officer foolish, an act widely labeled as despicable.
Well, almost immediately, people started comparing this incident to a situation back in 2022 involving the Lagos state governor, Babajide Sanwo-Olu. And the contrast is pretty stunning. Where Wike chose confrontation, Sanwo-Olu chose de-escalation, calmly telling an officer that he would just contact his superiors. Those 2 videos, played side by side online, have become this instant case study in leadership styles under pressure.
For a lot of critics, this wasn't just some one-off incident. They see it as part of a much larger pattern. This quote really captures that feeling, a sentiment from commentators who claim the minister has a history of just ignoring court orders when it comes to land disputes. They're arguing that this kind of public confrontation was bound to happen with a governing style that seems to value executive power over legal due process. But listen, Minister Wike wasn't the only one getting scrutinized here. This whole episode raised another huge question. What in the world was the military doing there in the first place? And this shifts our focus to the other side of the coin, the legality of using the armed forces to settle what is, at its core, a private land dispute. To really get why this is such a big deal, you have to look at the law. The Nigerian Constitution is crystal clear on what the military is for. Their job is national defense and, yes, supporting civil authorities, but only when the president gives a specific order to restore order. Using them for a land dispute, well, it's a bit like calling the fire department because you have a leaky faucet. It's the wrong tool for the job, and it suggests the normal system is broken.
So here's the bottom line from legal experts. Deploying soldiers to guard a piece of land in a civil dispute is a major overstep. It's been called unlawful and an abuse of power. Critics argue this is part of a really troubling pattern where powerful people use their military connections for personal benefit, essentially treating state power like their own private security firm. The proper way to handle this? The former naval chief could have and should have taken the matter to court.
And this leads us to a really powerful analogy that's been used to describe this whole mess: a collision of impunity. Just picture it.
Two massive, powerful trucks are speeding towards the same intersection. Both drivers are convinced they have the right-of-way, and neither one is paying any attention to the traffic lights, which, in this case, represent our courts and legal institutions. The result is this ugly, public, and frankly dangerous crash. It stopped being about who is right or wrong and became about two sides allegedly choosing raw power over due process.
The fallout from that collision was immediate, and it was severe. This wasn't just a political headache. A former Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tuker Beretta, framed this in the most serious way possible, as a direct threat to our national security. And when a man like that speaks, the defense community listens very, very carefully.
Now, this quote right here is incredibly important. Beretta didn't just call it bad behavior. He called the minister's verbal attack an act of profound indiscipline. The command and control structure he mentioned, that is the absolute backbone of any military. It's the system that ensures discipline and that orders are followed without question. So the argument is that by publicly dressing down an officer, the minister was taking a sledgehammer to the very foundation of that structure.
So, after that strong condemnation, Beretta laid out two very specific demands. First, he wants an immediate apology to the Commander-in-Chief, President Tinubu. This is all about respecting the hierarchy. In his view, the minister disrespected the president's ultimate authority over the armed forces. And, second, he wants a personal apology to the officer himself. This is about restoring the dignity, not just of the man, but of the uniform he wears. All right, let's zoom out for a second. This one viral incident, it's really just a symptom of a much, much larger problem. When powerful people start to feel like they can just bypass our institutions, the courts, the official channels, due process, what you get is a systemic failure. This isn't just about two individuals anymore. It's about the health of the entire system.
This really gets to the heart of that impunity versus impunity argument. On one hand, you've got the FCT minister, who's being criticized for his confrontational style, all while saying he was just enforcing land regulations. And on the other hand, you've got a former naval chief criticized for using soldiers to protect a private interest. What critics are saying is that both sides chose a show of force instead of the rule of law, and that creates a situation where public trust just can't win. And just to add another complicated layer to this, there are these unverified reports floating around about the land itself. The allegation is that this plot of land was originally given to military officers, but was then taken back by the minister and given to political allies. Now, we have to be super clear. These are unverified claims, but they're a huge part of the public story, and they give some context as to why both sides might feel so strongly about this particular piece of dirt.
So after all of that, what's the big takeaway? This incident has really sparked a national conversation about the nature of power, the critical importance of process, and what actually happens when those two things collide. This is where we go beyond just talking about what happened and start thinking about what it all means for the future.
When you boil it all down, it comes to this one number: 2. Two powerful entities that, instead of going to court to solve a civil problem, chose a path of direct confrontation that could have easily ended in bloodshed. The young soldiers on both sides of this were put in a terrible, dangerous position, stuck between powerful men giving conflicting orders, all because the established process was ignored.
And that leaves us with this final critical question to think about. When the big men decide the rules just don't apply to them, when they sidestep the very institutions that are meant to keep things fair and prevent chaos, who really ends up paying the price for that? It's almost never them. It's the public's trust in leadership, it's the integrity of our institutions, it's the belief that justice is for everyone, not just for the powerful.
So this brings us to our final thoughts for reflection. First, who is actually shaping the direction of this situation, and for what purpose? And maybe more importantly, how does this kind of high-level power play affect the average household, the community, and the future that regular people are just trying to build? How do you see this whole thing? Drop your opinion in the comments section. If this breakdown gave you some clarity, remember to like, subscribe, and share. Let's continue the conversation.